Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about using Vertica ORC reader with business intelligence tools. So some of you might be familiar with what an ORC is. In the popular series by J.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, there was a fictional character called an orc. And Wikipedia's definition of an orc is that it's a fictional humanoid creature, part of a fantasy race very similar to a goblin. So today we are not going to be talking about goblins, but we are going to be talking about orc, a different kind of orc. And in the Hadoop world, an orc is something called an optimized row columnar, and it's a different kind of format. It's basically a file, a different structure, very similar to Vertica's native ROS format. Orc stores tables by dividing them into groups of rows called stripes and then storing the data within the stripes in column order. And that gets you the benefit of doing things like run length encoding and delta encoding and bit packing because that data is sorted in column order, very similar to the format that Vertica has and its ROS format. Stripes can be further compressed using zlib or snappy, and which helps reduce the size of the files as well. And stripe metadata min-max values per column are all things that can be leveraged by this new ORC API, in which Vertica now, starting with 7.1.2, does a leverage built right into its copy command. So think of ORC as just really, it's not really unique to HDFS or Hive or anything else. It's really independent. It's a separate kind of file, like, similar to, another file like JSON or CSV or whatever. So what are the benefits of using ORC with Vertica? Speed and ANSI SQL against data in HDFS. So what we try to do is we do predicate pushdown and column pruning. So predicate pushdown moves parts of the query execution closer to the data, reducing the amount of data that must come back from disk or the network. And if you have a scenario where the cluster where Vertica is co-located with the HDFS nodes, the query can also take advantage of data locality, which is very good from a performance perspective as well. So how does this work in Vertica? Very simple. We support something called external table. Now this example is using the Vertica HDFS connector. We're creating an external table. And what we're doing down here is we're giving it something called a user-defined extension. In this case, it's a source. And we're giving it the URL of where in HDFS is our data. So this is something that we supported in previous versions of Vertica and continue to support. But what's different about Vertica 7.1.2 is now, like I mentioned before, we support the ORC reader built right into the copy command. So very similar, same exact table. In this particular case, we're putting it in a different schema. But if you look at the copy command, we're using Web HDFS, which is the standard protocol for anyone who wants to get data out of HDFS using a REST-based API. What's different is that we're going to say on any node ORC. So the keyword there is ORC, and the fact that we're wildcarding this, if you notice there, as we're pointing to a location in HDFS, we're going to be able to stream this data across into Vertica in a fashion that's parallelized, and that's what this slide is describing. So basically the way it works is the first step is to ask the Hadoop name node for the location of the data of where this file exists in HDFS. Now after that, there will be obviously no more communication with the name node, but what's going to happen is that Vertica is going to reach out into HDFS and just like very similar to what we do with our existing query planner, we're going to go out and pull in only those columns and through the column pruning and pull that information back and also do predicate pushdown. If you've got a where clause, we're going to respect that as well as we stream that data back into Vertica. So what we did to test this is we took a business intelligence tool, Tableau, and we ran that on top of, we basically took the Vertica vmart database, which is our samples, and we loaded that into Vertica, we loaded that into HDFS as an ORC format. And we did the same thing, and we compared it to loading that same data into HDFS, but just using our normal external table syntax in raw text format. So what you're seeing here are the differences in timing. So we took the Tableau dashboard And we put it on top of that data in HDFS through Vertica using the new syntax that we just talked about. And you noticed here that on average, you're going to get about a almost three times factor improvement over just regular external text files that are in HDFS. So in summary, what this allows you to do is blend, another thing it allows you to do is blend data in HDFS with data in Vertica. So you can do cross joins. You might have some data in HDFS, but you want to go ahead and join with data in the ROS and Vertica and ROS format. You can do that now with this capability. We can also do things like predicate pushdown and column pruning, which will help improve the performance compared to what you would experience just accessing our external tables with raw text data in HDFS. And you get full ANSI SQL compliant access to the data in HDFS. So today what we're going to do is actually do a demonstration showing you the ORC reader with a business intelligence tool. In this particular case, we're going to be using Tableau, but it can be any tool. Before we launch into the demonstration, what we're going to do is we're going to show you the data in HDFS. Here we're using just Hue, the file browser built into Hue. If you notice, we're looking at just a directory, and there's some files in there, some directories, and then this first thing we'll do is take a look at the data in raw text format. And then we'll take a look at the data in ORC format. If you notice there, you can't read it because it's compressed and stored in a column format. And then we're just put on an example. In this particular case, we're going to use the dbviz, which is a JDBC-based tool to allow you to look at the data inside a relational database. And we're going to be looking at that tool as well as another one called Tableau. So let's go ahead and launch into the demonstration. All right, so for today's demonstration, we're going to show you how Vertica can be used on top of data that you have in HDFS, specifically ORC format. So the first thing we wanted to look at before we launch into the BI tool demo was take a look at the data in HDFS. So here I'm using a distribution for Horton, and we're looking at the file browser built right into Hue. If you notice, I'm just navigating down a different directory under user HDFS vmart ext, and if I navigate down to the call center dimension directory, you'll see there that there's a file, just a regular text file. I can select that, and there's the data. So this is the data that's going to be, this is an example of data that is in raw text format inside HDFS. And in Vertica, you can just create an external table and access that data, just very similar like what you can do with the ORC format. So that's what we're looking at here is in this tab. We're looking at data that's in a different format, ORC. It's another file format that Hive supports. Underneath Apps, Hive, Warehouse, I have another directory called Call Center Dimension ORC. And you can see there if I select on that file, obviously you can't make any sense of it because it's in a whole compressed format that ORC supports. Like I said before, very similar to the Vertica ROS format. So that's an example of the data that's in HDFS. I'm just going to show you now a tool called DB Visualizer, which allows you to go through and look at the various tables that you have in your schema. So in this particular case, what we've done is, as I mentioned before, we've loaded the samples Vertica vmart data into a regular ROS format inside Vertica. That's what this schema represents here, vmart. These are all just regular ROS tables inside Vertica. And if I select call center, I can navigate and there's the data. So just like regular data in Vertica, with external tables, they show up as just like a whole nother table inside Vertica. So as I navigate down ext orc, this is data that's actually coming from HDFS in that ORC format. And just like if I navigate down through tables and select customer dimension here, this data is not inside Vertica, it's actually in HDFS. And we're actually reaching out into the Hadoop cluster with that new ORC reader leveraging that API to pull back the data into Vertica. So this is an example of DBViz. It's a JDBC-based tool that we're going to just use to show you what's inside Vertica. What I'd like to do next is actually launch into Tableau and show you what it would look like from an end user's perspective. So here's an example of a Tableau dashboard, and this workbook at the top there, you can see it's going against VMart. So when I click this inventory dash tablet here, this workbook, this is a window on the upper left of the Vertica log. You can see there's a number of different SQL statements getting executed there. I can click on these different areas in the example, and you can see there are more SQL being executed. Now this is going against the ROS formatted data in Vertica. And if I check this, select this drop down, if I want to look at my data by category versus product, I can do that as well. And if you look closely here under the from statement in some of the SQL, you'll see that there's a VMart dots. All right, so this data is coming from the regular format, but let's go ahead and take a look at it, what it would look like of data in Vertica, same exact dashboard, except now we're looking at data in HDFS that's coming from HDFS. So the results will be exactly the same as what we experienced here on the right-hand side. It's just that now the data is housed in HDFS. So I can just do exactly the same thing that I did before with the navigation. You can see there that this dashboard is being refreshed category. Now if I look at that window, you'll see that instead of pulling from VMart, it's actually pulling from ext orc, right? So ext orc was the schema in Vertica that was pointing to the data in HDFS format, ORC format. So anything that I do here in terms of analysis is pulling data back from your Hadoop cluster in ORC format. So that's just an example of how you can do a dashboard. In this particular case, we're using Tableau. What I want to do is go ahead and create something completely from scratch to show you some of the other capabilities that you have. So when I connect to data, I no longer have to pick, the Hortonworks Hive connector, the Cloudera connector, or the MapR. I can just select HP Vertica and use it to be my hub for all my data inside the Vertica cluster. So in this case, I'm just going to put in my database, my username and password, and click OK. And so what you're going to be seeing here is just a regular connection to Vertica, and I can select the schema, right? So let's say I wanted to blend the data from Hadoop. Let's say my call center dimensions in Hadoop, and I want to blend that to data that I have in the Vertica VMart. I can do that here very easily by just navigating down and picking my fact table. Might be in Vertica. In this case, I have my call center. I just need to pick the joining criteria. In this case, it's going to be the call center key. And then I click Update Now, and now we're actually performing a cross join between data in HDFS and data in Vertica. So now I can start building out my content. As an analyst, I don't need to be overwhelmed with the cumbersome task of having to pick different drivers and whatnot. All this data can be accessed right through Vertica. So maybe I want to report my sales quantity. This is coming from my fact. Over here, I might want to break it out by region, which is coming from my data in ORC format. So if we go back and take a look at the Vertica log, you should see that we're actually combining. There's my ext orc. We're combining data from my call center in the ORC format in HDFS, and then we're also blending that to data on the VMart schema, which is the data inside the Vertica ROS format. So there's an example of a query that's pulling data from actually two totally separate sources in an ANSI SQL compliant format. So in summary, I wanted to point out some of the benefits that you get with the new ORC reader. Once again, we just showed how to blend data in HDFS with data in Vertica, improves performance over the traditional external text files you might have had in HDFS using our old HDFS connector by doing predicate pushdown and column pruning, and you get full ANSI SQL compliant access to data in Vertica. Thank you for your time, and I hope this has been beneficial to you.